Hey, everybody. Welcome to the RESGEN Giving Life Podcast, where we hear stories and have conversations about life in Christ, everyday discipleship, and ways that we as men give life to others. My name is Tom Henderson, the founder of RESGEN, and I'm super pumped you're tuning in for the podcast today. Before I introduce you to my guest, I want to remind you that the tickets for RESGEN Men's Summit 2023, which takes place on Saturday, February 4th, are on sale now. This half-day event goes from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. and brings over 1,000 men together for 5 hours of encouragement, laughter, and impact. This year's speakers include New York Times bestselling author John Acuff, Dallas Cowboys chaplain Jonathan Evans, Ricky Jenkins, and pastor, comedian Ted Cunningham. Tickets for this amazing event are only $30, and you can grab one to join us either in person in Sioux Falls or online at resgen.org. And while you're there, be sure to also grab your tickets for RESGEN's couples event, Date Night Comedy, which is happening prior to the summit on February 2nd and 3rd. All right, let's get into today's show. Joining me in conversation is a friend of mine named Matt Jensen. Matt and I have known each other since we were in youth group as teenagers and since we worked at TGI Fridays together over 30 years ago. Matt's a follower of Christ, a husband, a dad to 3 teen daughters, and a business owner who recently made the big decision to leave a company that he helped grow to be one of the premier vision care centers in the country. On today's show, Matt and I discuss our need for rest, for unplugging from the daily grind so that we can care for both ourselves and for our loved ones. Throughout this episode, you'll hear Matt share openly about the feelings of anxiety and burnout that he was having that led to his company giving him a sabbatical so that he could focus on his mental health. We talk about how Matt used that time off and what the Lord shared with him about what his life needed to look like afterwards. We also visit about how the strength of his faith and the faith of his family as a whole has been crucial through each of the challenges they've faced over the last several years. This is going to be a very good episode, friends, and I'm so glad that you're here for it. Here's my conversation with Matt Jensen. Matt Jensen, my friend, it is great to have you on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me. It's been a long time coming. I look forward to this conversation, Tom.
Yeah, dude, for sure. And this is so fun just because, number one, how long we've known each other.
Yeah.
I mean, we've known each other since we were just, we were youngsters.
Teens.
Yeah. We were teens when we first met each other back in youth group days.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I think that the relationship really went from surface level of great depth once we started working at TGI Fridays together.
Well, that's what I think. Anytime you build a bond over jalapeno poppers, you know it's going to last a lifetime.
Oreo madness.
Don't go throwing that around. That's a solid way to build a brotherhood right there.
And our friendship lasted longer than TGI Fridays here in Sioux Falls.
Yeah. That's right. It did.
You know, that restaurant is no longer here, but yet our friendship still remains.
Yeah, we weathered it. Yeah, that's right.
Well, I promise we're going to have some great conversation together. For all you listeners, you're probably wondering, is this what they're going to talk about? They're going to talk about TGI Fridays and like memories.
Lock-ins?
But I assure you, I mean, we may come back to it.
Yeah, we'll revisit.
Because I think some of those theories that we had to learn to be a server there, the duck theory, and what was your favorite theory?
Steel pole theory.
Oh, okay. I don't remember that one. Tell me that one real quick.
Steel pole theory, you do something wrong, we'll kind of thwap you with a pole, but it's padded, right? And, don't do that, do this way. We'll model it how it should be done. The next time you do it, we just remove a layer. And eventually, it gets down to the steel pole.
Yeah.
And then you got to go work at Applebee's. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. I love it. Okay. Well, I promise we are going to talk more than just about TGI Fridays and memories there. We're gonna have a great conversation. Hopefully, it's going to be meaningful for you and I, but also just for our listeners. Because I think that the content that we're going to be discussing today is going to be helpful, not just meaningful, but helpful for listeners. But before we get into that, give a quick little introduction of you, your family, the professional hats that you've worn up to this point, and I know that one of those hats is changing or has changed here in just the recent weeks. But so just give a little intro before we get into stuff today.
Well, Tom, you and some of your friends actually have real depth of meaning when it comes to my life, harmony, and life peace. I met my wife through the youth group that we both went to, and she didn't go to the youth group, but she had some friends in it. And we were on the campus of University of Sioux Falls watching a lecture by a pediatrician who did the medical crucifixion of Christ, You remember this?
Yeah, Scott McKercher.
Yep, Dr. McKercher.
Yeah.
And he it was, I had been in town for 3.5 months or so, and she had only been in town for a year. And that's when I leaned over to a friend of yours and said, who's that girl? And she was, wearing an army jacket and Doc Martens. She's a vegetarian, and I had just moved from like a cattle ranch and farm, and I'm like, she was so exotic, man. It just blew my mind. She's from upstate New York, and I'm like, this is some city girl. I had no idea it was just as rural there. But I mean, so I ended up, chasing her around for a long time, and we both kind of dated other people. I say that, it's a lot like scripture when it says a man is someone who's put away his childish things. And I had a lot of things to put away. But, 10 years later, we hit it off with finality. We were done kind of being youthful and with our ways and really committed to each other. And that has been amongst my faith, which is a decision that I almost can't take credit for other than being willing. It is the best and most important decision I've ever made. And as far as introductions, it's all rooted there with my relationship with Beth. She's, I said recently at an event, she's my buddies and I in college called her my drop anything girl, because no matter what I was doing, who I was dating, I'd drop them if she ever gave me the time of day. Now, luckily, she didn't, because I would have got a pretty bad reputation. But no, she's always been a little bit out of my league and stays there. Now, so background, I grew up in Pierre on a farm. We moved here right in the middle of high school. I moved to a town close by here, Brandon, graduated from Brandon Valley. And within a few weeks of being here, got a job at TGI Fridays and ended up being a place where I had a lot of friends. The type of place where you go and you hang out even if you're not working, just because it's that kind of energy and atmosphere. And it really matched my temperament. I just, I'm whatever is a little bit more insane than an extrovert, just a little too much sometimes. And being around that gives me more energy. It doesn't exhaust me. It gets me even more wired. And it was just a perfect fit. And we'll get into it, but I did learn a lot about customer service there. I mean, it was really where I cut my teeth on what customer experience, what it takes to, create a loyalty amongst colleagues, but also amongst your customers. And that was a good place through high school and through college that I ended up working. And through college, I studied a lot of different things. I ended up graduating with religion and psychology as my double majors, and I thought I might go into ministry. I had hoped to, and I was really involved with Campus Crusade at the time, and it had been part of my coming back to faith story. I don't know if we all do, but I certainly did the first couple of years, sow my wild oats and experience the college scene. And now Cru was so instrumental in just gently, putting their arm around me and walking me back towards faith with all of the things that I knew in my upbringing, because I had a very faithful household, and my parents were really good about that. And all of the things that we had hidden in our hearts came back, just like the Bible promises, that it won't return empty. Yeah. Well, I'm getting into my senior year, and I'm a big man on campus, and I thought I'd go into ministry, or either go to seminary. I called it cemetery. Go into seminary or go on staff on some college campus. Maybe even do some overseas stuff. And in my interview in November of my senior year, they said, "Hey, you're exactly what we're looking for. You can probably rock a polo and khakis and white shoes, just like every other campus." At the time, that was like the whole look.
Yeah, that was the campus minister vibe. Yeah,
with a lanyard and like what a handspring pocket calendar. I mean, it's just the whole cliche. But I had too much debt from my schooling. And I had done well in college, but not well enough to really get any scholarships for things beyond, like an advanced degree in theology or something. And so they said, "Why don't you go work a few years and come back and try again, and we'd love to have you." Well, I mean, that was like a sucker punch, because I went to this big fancy school, and I had done well, and I had done a lot of extracurricular things and worked my way through, but still had some debt. Basically, anything I could afford to take, I took. And And so I was kind of down. I thought this degree could work for me. And here's the very first option I have to do something long term. And they won't even let me work for free.
Yeah.
I have to raise my own support. And they're like, no, you can't even work for us for free.
Yeah.
It's way too. I mean, that's a lot of debt.
Yeah.
So they challenged me to work for a couple of years. And I remember that weekend, it was in the Twin Cities. And a guy came up to give a keynote presentation, and he talked about how a lot of you are now going into ministry based on these interviews you've had this weekend, and a lot of you are going to go to China and Turkey, and a lot of you are going to go to University of Wisconsin or wherever. But some of you aren't. And no matter what you do, you need to have a ministry. So if you're going to be a nurse, have a ministry. If you're going to be a businessman, have a ministry. If you're going to be a teacher, have a ministry. And it just made me feel a little lighter. And then he began to tell a story about how he and some businessmen in his hometown had gotten together every Wednesday morning in his conference room and started to ask God to lay a certain region on their hearts to pray for. And they began to pray for Mongolia. And over the ensuing weeks and months and years, they established relationships there, and the communist rule had just fallen, and they literally were invited in to come build the first commercial free speech television station, Eagle TV, in Mongolia, and they used it to run kind of positive family programming, ministry-based, gospel-oriented ads to ask for more information. And this gentleman happened to be there when the Constitution, in the room, when it was being rewritten to allow for religious freedoms in that country. And that's now an organization called AMONG. And the business leaders, they're all over Sioux Falls now. But Craig Lawrence was the one giving the talk. And he said, no, so even if you're an ad man from small town South Dakota, you should have a ministry. And so this is the keynote on that night.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking to myself, borderline shaft of light.
Yeah.
Like I'm working for him.
Yeah. And for a guy that really thought you were called, that you were moving towards full-time ministry, you go from, maybe, but not with us. You go to this conference, and to hear that word, really the exact word that the Lord knew. And I'm sure it's one of those moments where it's like, there's no one else in this room but me and Craig at the time. Like just saying like,
here's a word for you.
That is a word for you personally that I think is so important, number one, for everyone to hear, because we're all to be involved in kingdom work, but especially important for you at that specific time.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Tom. And it was a moment where he was extremely tender with me, and just making it really clear. He was speaking right to my heart. So, I went back to college and had a semester to finish out, and I remember I was thinking, I'm gonna get a job at Lawrence and Schiller. I'm going to give it everything I got. And so I applied like crazy, and nobody looked at my stuff because I was a religion major, for crying out loud. And I learned later that there was a thing with their internship where they were addressed to a certain person, which was a cue to everybody internally that it was going to go in a box over here and be reviewed. Yeah. That person actually didn't exist. Oh. If somebody called in and asked where their application was, it was a cue to everybody. Masterful, right? Yeah. Marketing 301 there. But after a while, I just, after not hearing and applying a couple of times, and it was J-term break and of my senior year, and I remember thinking, man, I don't want to be in my 40s and look back and wonder what would happen if I swung at this thing as hard as I possibly can. And I went on a little shopping spree, and I went and got just anything that creatively spoke to me, and came back to my dorm room, and I had an oar for a boat, and I had a propeller for a boat, and I had an airplane propeller. I had a bunch of just trinkets, right? Yeah. And I took all of it back except this 5.5-foot airplane propeller. And I ended up having a box specially made, and I sent it through the mail with my resume wrapped around it. And I had a friend who worked there already, and FedExed it to them to arrive at 10 the next day. And I got a email alert, on the old DOS-based email systems. It was a black screen with green blinking and blinking box, and it said, your package has arrived. And she emailed me and said, "What did you do?" The whole place is talking about Propeller Boy, and they called that afternoon. I had an interview, and the interview, they asked me to start right away. And the next thing you know, I'm working at Lawrence and Schiller. And I really thought, Tom, that I was going to work with Craig to do ministry work, because at the time he was standing in as the head of communications for Crew. And God didn't have that in the plan.
Yeah.
He instead had me handle a lot of Craig's accounts while Craig was doing that work. And I just fell in love with business. I just fell in love with the market. And again, that background that we learned in customer service of what makes people choose you, be loyal to you, applied to the business world is the best way to do business. Can even feel like a calling. And I was having a lot of fun. And my very first client was Vance.
Yeah.
The one I had on my own. And for a few years, he asked me at the end of every meeting to leave and join him. And man, I was having fun. I loved what I was doing. I was working with Craig, but I was mentored by Paul Schiller, when Craig was traveling or whatever. So it was this great, like nobody got an experience like that. It was kind of golden child.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So
treatment.
you're working with the owners of this company and just in with that. And then, Vance, who you're speaking of, is Vance Thompson from Vance Thompson Vision,
right? Which
we're going to get into that whole, world as well. And so, but I love that you shared the story about the propeller, because I've known that story, when I first moved back to Sioux Falls and 2005 and we connected again and talked. I love that story because it just shows your persistence in just running after things. And I just think that so many times, whether it's because we lack the confidence, or we just lack, belief in ourselves or whatever, that we don't necessarily swing for the fences. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that you've just always had, the mentality that I've remembered from the time we first met to then when I heard that story, I said, oh, that's just so perfect. And that's just so, Matt, and you're, the way that you pay attention to detail and all those kinds of things. And you've always been one of those people that has been very sharp. And so I did not know that Vance was one of your, main clients there at the time. And then you eventually transition from Lawrence and Schiller to Vance Thompson Vision Clinic, which at the time was it was doing some things, but it was still a relatively small shop.
Right. There was 13 people, including Vance. I was employee number 13.
Yeah.
And Vance was doing a lot of FDA monitored clinical trials and doing a lot of travel around the world to teach others how to do things at that level. We're in the eye surgery world, which is his special place. And my charge was basically to, as excellent as he is, to try to create a team around him that was at least that excellent. And for him to have a platform that continued to rise with him so he could continue to stand taller. And it's been an absolute blast. And, looking back to share an office with Paul and Craig and to be mentored by them, I learned very quickly how to not only run, marketing, but also business operations and things like that. And it was so vital. And applicable to the work day one, even though I didn't have a lick of healthcare experience. So Vance and I ran off to the races with the dream of having the customer be central in healthcare, which was, I was in meetings in healthcare where people would say, we don't call them customers, they're patients, right? And that's just not how I think about things. Whoever is paying, that's the customer. And in healthcare in particular, I think we've lost sight of that because the payer's paying. And so nobody knows who they're answering to, which makes it get kind of funky from a customer experience standpoint. But the nice thing about working with Vance is that he's not an or person, he's an and person. And so when you say, what would you rather do? Would you rather grow in this area or would you rather grow in this area? And he's like, yes, both. And so that led to some really great and meteoric growth over the last almost 20 years. And so we continued to swing for the fences, where we were just a little clinic on the campus of a health system here in town. Now we have a glitzy and glamorous office with lights that light. It's a perfect way to wayfind in Sioux Falls, and a site similar to that in 7 other towns.
Yeah. And your team has gone from 13 to
almost 400.
To almost 400.
Yeah.
In a relatively short amount. I mean, you say 20 years, but that's a relatively short amount of time.
Really, in the last 6 years have we been expanding like that.
Right, exactly. And at the same time that all of that is happening, and you're bringing all this attention to customer experience, caring for the customer, which I don't want that to be missed in this story, is because the most important thing that we are to do as followers of Christ is to care for other people. And you have brought that mentality into whatever environment you have been in, not just only because of business, but that's just because who you are. I mean, we're called to care for people. But when we lose sight of the customer, when we lose sight of the person, and it just becomes about expansion or growth for growth or expansion's sake, well, then that can be, you can tell that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's one of the things that has caused the organization to grow so well and so quickly, is because you've always made sure that the customer was the focus.
Yeah.
And how do we make sure that
well,
is
even one
always
step beyond that, Tom, because that was really, a battle cry of mine for a long time, is the customer is central, the customer is central. And it required an awakening for me, and some wisdom from Vance and another Dr. John Berdahl, to challenge me that if the customer is going to be central, then the team has to be central to leadership.
Yeah, that's good.
Because there's no, I can't even touch all 400 people.
No.
And so we can't make the customer central to me. Who cares if it is to me? I'm 3 or 4 steps away from the patient at all times. And so, but if all 400 believe that the customer is central, and it's modeled to them by how we treat them,
Mm-hmm.
then they're able to model that, to the customers in real time. And I'm a marketing guy, but there's this saying that through my study of customer experience, which is a real part of study in the business world,
Mm-hmm.
that marketing is a tax you pay for being unremarkable. Okay. Your requirement to go out into the marketplace and spend money to draw attention to yourself, that's a tax that you pay for not having the experience when they're with you be lights out, just be amazing. And if it was, then you wouldn't have to go spend those dollars. Well, the same is true in our personal lives.
Mm.
Telling everybody about your ministry, your work, your business, how great a dad you are, how great a father you are.
Yeah.
Telling them is a tax you pay for not necessarily being great at it in the first place on your own. Because if I was just a better dad, if I was just a better husband, man, my wife would be so at peace. People around me would be so at peace that I probably wouldn't even tell anybody, right? Because they would just be so. Now, the analogy doesn't work perfectly, right? Because people also live their own lives and have their own baggage. But those are the things that I'm thinking about, because while I've had this business side, swing for the fences life,
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's too much.
Mm.
And sometimes I feel like not only do I not want to swing for the fences, I don't even feel like walking.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel like playing today.
Yeah. Yeah. Get in the game, because at the same time you're running, the growth and overseeing all that with Vance and the team and Vance Thompson, you're running Matt Jensen Marketing.
Right.
You've got your own company that you started,
Mm-hmm.
How many years ago now?
Well, it'd be almost 15 years.
15 years. So, I mean, you're running basically 2 very successful
Mm-hmm.
companies. Your team of 400 advanced, your team at MJM is
14.
14.
Yeah.
But it's still a lot of people, still a lot of responsibility. You're having to, and I know that just the way that the business partnership worked, it was a lot of things were able to kind of overlap and do a lot of great things together, which was a perfect setup, which is just so great. But yet that still lended itself to what you just said earlier about, it led you to a point though, where you were experiencing an extreme amount of burnout.
Yeah.
And
That's the right word too, Tom. And, to just talk about MJM for just a second, the reason it made so much sense is that the more we did work with companies coming from overseas or people with new ideas and technology, they would be early in their adoption or early in their company's creation. They wouldn't know where to go first. And it was really hard with a marketing background and a business background to just, you're just chomping at the bit to say, boy, if you just made this decision this way, it'd be a lot more efficient for you as a company. And that just led to some consulting. And now we've got a team that helps them, brand themselves. And it's niche. Half the work is in healthcare. The other half is in Main Street business and ministry. But that's really where I keep my saw sharp.
Yeah.
Is within that work. But I think that, the burnout is in part because of just the sheer amount of work. But I also think that much of it is self-inflicted because of an inability to stop swinging for the fences. Okay, this desire to why do I feel like I need to go out there and just win every day, just crush it? I've shared this story a lot, but I really do believe, and it's what my sabbatical the last few months has been really trying to focus on is, I don't think for one second that I'm more creative than our creator. I mean, that we can be creative is a reflection of being created in the image of God.
Yeah.
Right. We're the only creation that is creative, and we're the only creation where that has a deity that's a worker, hands in dirt to create us. I imagine God with dirt under his fingernails, right? So I mean, clearly God loves work, and I think work can be worship. But God also loves rest. And why do I feel like I can't? Well, it's because I've got this need to be desired, to win, to be worshipped, maybe even. Maybe, if I can prove to everybody that I didn't even need help getting here, maybe I didn't even need God, then I will rightly place myself on the throne, hunting to think about life that way, right?
Yeah.
And I don't cognitively think that way, but I go to where I'm pet, and
yeah, I've heard another speaker say you do it for the strokes,
right?
You do it for the
yes, that's exactly right.
We all desire affirmation, right? We all desire to be told good job. We all desire. I mean, there's two things that every human being. Well, there's a few, but attention and affirmation are two of the keys. And so we will do things to be noticed, to be affirmed, to be told good job. Think about our kids. Our kids the same way, right? And specifically, their dads. They want to be told that their dads are proud of them, that they're doing a good job, that they see a potential in them, and that a future and all those kinds of things. And so that whole idea of doing it for the attaboys. And then the podcast just prior to that was put out just a couple weeks ago with my friend Joshua Duncan. I don't know, you probably know Joshua, but he's a counselor, and we were talking about just questions that men often don't want to just sit with. And the questions of what am I thinking? Why am I at where I'm at? And a lot of times we don't want to ask ourselves those kind of questions. So we just work harder. We just keep ourselves busy so that we don't have to, ask ourselves that question. And so I want to get to this part of your journey because you're realizing that you're at a very tired state of life. You're tired mentally, you're tired emotionally, physically. So you're granted an opportunity through Vance Thompson, the clinic there, to say, hey, look, we want to give you a sabbatical. Did they notice that you were tired? Is this, I mean, did they something ain't right with you, dude?
It's really, it kind of came on with COVID. There was a little bit of burnout, I think, coming into it. And then, like many organizations, our leadership, I'm so proud of them because they just went nuts in taking care of the team. We sent videos out a couple of times a week with what's going on, and we tried to land the plane. We'd say we're trying to land the plane with everybody on it, and we didn't furlough people, and we just wanted to keep everybody whole. And leadership all the way from doctors on down took breaks from the from getting paid to make sure that the team was whole. And that eventually ramped itself back up and everybody was fine. But I'm really proud of that. And one of our doctors said, this is the Super Bowl of leadership. And I remember wearing that like a badge of honor, And so I could get pumped up for that because it was a crisis.
Yeah.
But I really think that since then, 2021 and into 2022, when we still have this looming unknown, we still have this looming kind of what's the market going to do? Okay, so I guess team members are going to be light on their feet. They're going to leave our team for $1 an hour. There's everything that we believe about loyalty and things like that is being questioned. And I think that's actually this is the new Super Bowl of leadership. Not then, because a lot of people perform in a crisis.
Yeah. And you had no choice.
Yeah.
At that level.
I mean,
at that point, everybody was doing it. Yeah.
But now it's hard to get up unnoticed every day and tackle the same things. And it's exhausting because you've been doing it for 2.5 years. So coming, into 2022, the doctor started to notice that I was just, losing the spring in my step. And they just said, listen, your family's been struggling. You've been struggling. Why don't you just take a couple months, focus on you, focus on them. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to write a book we just want you to just rest. We're not opening a new clinic or surgery center this year. And man, it was just like a huge weight off.
So was that hard for you to hear? I mean, did you at first fight that? Because, again, being a performance individual, production mindset, you and I are very similar in that. Was that difficult to admit?
So it's interesting. So I'm gonna make you guess. This will be like a podcast. Yeah. Like those of you at home can guess. What do you think my question was back to the doctors when they said, we'd like to extend you a sabbatical?
Well, one of two things I think of it could be, can this place survive without me? If I were to leave for a little bit, because you already talked about, how integral you have been to the team. Or wait, are you trying to replace me? That would be the one or two.
So the first one you can't ask, even though I probably thought it, right? Because I'm an egomaniac. Yeah. I mean, but it's unbecoming. Yeah. But the second one is exactly my question. Yeah. Like, you want me to come back, right? Yeah. Is this just a way? Like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
And isn't that fascinating? That I had lived my life up to that point seeking approval, and even with the gift of time, I can't. Even with the gift of rest, I second guess it, knowing that my performance should speak for itself up to that point. And I think it's a real testimony of the condition of my heart at that time. And you say, you're burnt out. I believe like right now I'm raring to go. I'm fully rested. I'm ready to engage. Having to hold myself back from engagement because I don't want to get back to where I was with just being overwhelmed, having it be too much. And the potential was there, and we all acknowledged it, that if I don't come back, it's because I don't want to come back, not because they don't want me back. Right. And so just a couple of weeks ago, I went to John Berdal and to Vance Thompson and said, you guys gave me something I never would have had, which was time, and time allowed me to reassess what I need and what I think is valuable, and the most important thing to me right now is time.
Yeah. So you're given the sabbatical. You're given it, and it was a total, several months that they gave you. So, one of the things that I don't do super well is rest, and I'm trying to get better at that. And you and I have had, great conversations about just how the grind just continues to wear you down, that you almost become addicted. You become addicted to the grind and just the whether it be for the strokes or for just like, I need to be productive so I'm worth something, that I hold value because of what I'm providing or what I'm, producing. So what were the conversations that you were having with God specifically during that sabbatical time? What was the Lord sharing with you, both just through the power of the Holy Spirit, and then also just like I want to know some of those key scriptures maybe that you found important at that time.
So a couple of things. One is, I'm not super legalistic. I grew up in a real legalistic home, but I was really eager to learn more about the Sabbath coming into my sabbatical, right? And so I didn't get much further than the root word. And at our house, that's something we're trying to just enjoy the Sabbath. Meaning, I live on a hobby farm, so there's always stuff to do, and you're always behind. And when we're walking around on a Sunday afternoon, and I'm compelled to pick up a shovel and do the work. What I'm trying to do is hold that thought captive and just ask myself, so why is it that I feel like on a day that God has set aside for me to just enjoy his wonder, why do I feel like I have to do it right now? Like, why right now? And just to hold that thought captive. And it's really not an answerable question, But what it does is it causes me to say, I'm going to trust that there's going to be time, if it's that important, during the other 6 days for me to shovel whatever that needed to be shoveled or whatever the case is. We're not victorious in that all the time, but I haven't ever in my life, except for the sabbatical, deliberately not swung for the fences, And so that's where I feel like he's speaking to me. Rest. I already chose you. Rest. I already know you. Rest. I already gave you a special word, for how you're to live your life. And so that's been compelling to me. My wife puts a lot of verses that are like power verses for our family to songs. She did it especially when the girls were little, but they're still memorable. But, rejoice in the Lord always. And I'll say it again, rejoice. Let your productiveness be evident to all. That's not what it says. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Be anxious about nothing, but with everything in prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, submit your request to God. And then what does he give you? Then the peace of God that transcends understanding will guard your heart and mind in Christ Jesus. And okay, so there's a whole bunch there that you can just feast on forever. Rejoice at your gentleness. What about killing it in the boardroom? What about slaying, the business? What about that? Yeah. No, gentleness. Let that be evident to all. Be anxious about nothing. There's just so much there for it to unpack, but that's really been something that's been in the forefront of my mind, especially during this time. Even to the conversations that I've had with my very, very close friends, Vance and John, and how I'm going to, that creates some anxiety. I've worked with them for a long, long time. And I love them. But even just in the conversation, just feeling like, you were lifted and carried through it and that it was responded to and received well. And that we can all look back on a couple of decades and say there was really good and important work done there. And so,
and the joy and the peace that you get from even that, and saying that was good, and that was a good season. But now there's this new season that I need to fully embrace. And it's interesting. So you talked about swinging for the fences and how you've never had a time where you haven't been swinging for the fences. But one of the things that I know that you and I have talked about in different conversations as well is that we always want to make sure that we are we haven't used this terminology before, but swinging for the fences in our marriage and swing for the fences in our relationships with our kids. Now I got 2 boys. You're, I think Twitter talks about growing up in a house with a queen and 3 princesses. So like you have 3 girls, I have 2 boys, significantly different, probably smells in my home as well as, conversations and whatever. But how has this helped maybe even just focus on the family so much more during this time and than you ever have been, ever have been able to?
Yeah. So I think that first of all, as far as the 2 boys to 3 girls, there is an activity equivalent there. I think it's actually 4 girls to 2 boys is the straight up equivalent,
maybe.
And what we have to pay for in the wedding thing, I think you make up for in car insurance.
Car insurance and injuries and all of that. Yes.
So it's a fair trade. But my girls are, they're just a wonder right now, and they are so impressive and so much like their mom, and how bright they are and how provocative their questions are, like meaningful for their ages. But I think the biggest thing that have been offered in this time is just presence. And that's an important word, because presence does not mean not absence. Because I was present physically before, and on my phone, and tackling what was next, or hopping on a call, or and none of that in and of itself is bad. I don't want to have anybody who's listening think, he went really off the deep end on not working. He thinks people should not work. No, I think we should definitely work. I just think that for me there was no boundaries. And while I was present physically, I was not present at all mentally, emotionally, and I am now. Though I still battle the phone. You know, it's that contraption is so addictive and distracting. But they comment about, you know, my spirit and how, you know, stressed I don't seem, and how, you know, they enjoy, you know, my company differently and more. They're very careful with how they say it.
Yeah.
But I think it's noticeable.
Yeah, exactly. So talk about now, so you've made this decision to depart from your role at Vance Thompson Vision. You are going to continue to run MJM, Matt Jensen Marketing. So, you know, you're going to be able to now, instead of wearing like 2 CEO, COO hats, wear one. But yet there still can be a temptation to rush back into productivity. Okay, now let's just grow this. Let's do this. Let's just because, especially of how you're wired and all of that kind of thing. And I know that one of the things that you don't want to do is just to go back into that same lifestyle. And so you've made a big step in saying, I'm not going to go back to this organization. And so that's a key step for sure. But yet you could still try to fill that void with something different. So I'm just interested in, like, are there some practices or some, you know, specific boundaries that you have put in place, or that maybe Beth has helped you put in place, your girls has helped you put in place, to make sure that you, as best you can, don't get back into that space where there's a unhealthy anxiety and stress level again?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you're talking about that, because for one, you know, we can come back and hit on it, but I think anxiety is a real topic that we can talk about today, especially amongst leaders, and represented with men. Okay. And so, and I suffer from it and do battle with it all the time. And I've found some victory there too. But I do need to monitor it. And so for the sake of my family and also my own health, I don't want to just replace, you know, the demands of one, a very exciting job with the demands of another. And don't get me wrong, it's not like if we don't have ideas to blow it up, or even plans to. You just have to do it in such a way where there's a governor, or there's walls put up, so I don't find myself not enjoying it. Now, for very literally, what that means is that, you know, I think as I talk to the MJM team, first of all, they've been doing really, really well without me being present. You know, and so what a bummer it would be for me to walk in, knock down all their bowling pins, and talk to them about how much of a leader I am to them when I've been pretty absent, you know? And so not only is that bad leadership, but it also can be resented. So I want to make sure that I'm mindful of where I'm stepping and sitting when I come in and tread lightly on the normals that are already there. Secondly, what I don't want to do is create a business that requires me, just like the last one did and has, and yet still have it be profitable and fun and do really good eternal work, and not eternal work. And so in doing that, I think just, you know, office hours are going to be important. Like, I'm literally only going to be in the office a certain amount of time, a certain amount of days, and then I'll be scheduled to be out of the office. Not that I can't do work that way, but I'll do it from home, or you know, while traveling, or while on the way to one of my girls' events, or and so we're just going to be really mindful of what we say yes to. We're also going to be really mindful of the kind of the physical. I'm going to just take better care of my body in that time as well. And so I think all of those things together, and then, you know, also saying it out loud to the team, saying it out loud on podcasts and to my wife, it's more likely to happen. Because people are
hold you accountable. I mean, you know, because if you're going to say that, especially as, I mean, what does Jesus say? Let your yes be yes and your no be no, right? And so when we share that and we allow other people in, and whether that be our families for sure, but also, you know, one of the things that I've mentioned this on so many different podcasts, is just the need for other men in their life, for men to have men in their life that speak truth into them, that encourage them, that challenge them, that to live in the light, to live by their word, to just really walk with them, to, like, where there's such a depth of relationship. And that's one of the things that, like, even you had that depth of relationship on a friend level too, but just also on that professional level with the docs at Vance Thompson, that they could come to you and say, hey man, you just to use your words, lost some spring in your step, and we need to have you kind of peel back a little bit because we're concerned about your health long term. Well, we need to have deep friendships with other men in our life that we allow in to tell us those hard truths as well, because those are the guys that'll kind of go to the mattresses for us or whatever and go into battle with us when we feel like, no, you know what, I've made this commitment that I do need to be healthier. I need to eat healthier, work out, sleep more. I mean, whatever it is. And for me, it's all those things. I probably need to do all those things more, right? But we need those guys in our lives to help hold our feet to the fire and live that out.
But it's not so unlike other things we've talked about here, Tom. We need to have it modeled. You can take that back to our time waiting tables. Yeah. It's easier to show people than it is to tell them, and they'll get it. And so the more we can, the more I can hopefully stand up and say, listen, these are the things I'm struggling with, and it's really affecting me negatively, both, whether it's personally, relationship wise or spiritually or emotionally, physically. But then as men, we shouldn't just say, okay, well, you're wounded. You can kind of feel like I don't want any, whatever that is, I don't want any on me. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of like back up slowly. And instead, and this I think appeals to men, we should carry our wounded.
Yeah.
We should help each other through it. And then it's going to be normalized for the next time that it happens, because I think it's more prevalent than we think.
Oh yeah, totally. I talked with Joshua about that on the last podcast about just, the lack of men that are open to being vulnerable with other men. And so I want to get into the whole topic of anxiety with you, because as I sit with guys in a large setting, whether that be in a larger room or just one-on-one with guys throughout the year, you can really tell that there is a lot of feelings of being overwhelmed, feelings of anxiousness. I don't know if they would label it anxiety, or they've been said that they've said, yep, you do carry anxiety with you or whatever, diagnosed. Sorry, I couldn't think of the word there, but there is a feeling of heaviness at times that I'm just feeling with men specifically. And that's what you're speaking of, is just this anxiety. And man, can I even admit that? Or does that show weakness? Does that mean that I'm less than? Does that mean that I'm not meeting whatever role I need to meet, that I'm not enough, that I don't measure up, right?
Right. I mean, that really resonates with me, Tom, because I think that, we do get to that spot where we feel like we just can't carry it and nobody gets us, right? And as men, we don't talk it out, right? We retreat, we go back into a hole, because if anybody knew that I can't handle this, well, then what kind of man am I? That's kind of what we think. And I think that the more we can, again, showcase, I'm happy to be, I wasn't as happy to be vulnerable, but having been vulnerable a few times, it resonates with so many people that I feel like it's a real gift I can give, is to just show out, have it be out in the public where my brokenness is.
Well, and to just know that, like, for people to know that they're not alone.
Right.
I just feel like that we're the most, this in marketing, but we're the most connected people on the planet, right now, in any day and age, but we're the most lonely as well, because we really allow people to know the true us? And, we've created whoever we want other people to see on whatever platform we happen to be on, but yet do we really understand who we are? And do they understand who we are?
Yeah. And again, I hate to be a broken record, but I just think of, come to me, all you who are weary, I'll give you rest. Right. And I think maybe women feel this too, but I can only speak to the male side of it. But I was weary, I needed somebody to take the yoke up with me. And that's precisely what God can do for us. I think that just, to talk about anxiety for a minute, the way I experienced it was especially in my lack of presence with my girls, and especially with my temper, just my general impatience. And it was probably ugliest with them. I mean, I notice it just in my work, but I mean, a little bit more snappy than I should be. And there's this funny story, man, where a couple of years ago, pre-COVID, we were traveling, and my folks were along with me, and my wife and our girls, and I had a talk, I had some interaction with one of my daughters, and my mom looked at me and she said, "Boy, you really kind of came down hard on her." And I was like, well, some kind of PG version of, "Mom, I love you and mind your own business." You know? and she said, I've been taking this medicine for anxiety, and I'm a lot less high strung. And I don't know if you'd ever consider it, but I mean, it really helps me. And I looked at her with such gall. And I was kind of fuming for a while. About a half an hour later, we're walking around the Mall of America. And I say to my wife, "You believe what my mom just asked me?" And I told her the whole story. And she said, she asked me to take these meds. And she said, "Oh, would you?" And so, my wife my mom speaking through my wife, she's just like, "Oh, I think it'd really help you too. And it would be such a gift to us." And it's when I realized I'm coming off different than I think. Where I think I'm coming, what I think my delivery is might be totally different than what people actually experience, especially when they're vulnerable and young and impressionable.
And we do that, don't we? I mean,
we do.
We protect ourselves. Our defenses go up. I remember a conversation that a friend of mine, I had this where one of my boys didn't get the right thing at the restaurant, or whatever. And they went to go get it and they brought it back, and I short fuse, and I got upset. And my buddy who was visiting from out of town, he said, "Hey, can I talk to you for a second?" We went out on the patio, and he's like, "I'm going to be real with you. That was not okay." and that is going to sever relationship long term in ways that you don't really realize. Like that's what I grew up with. And so he's able to talk about some of his and how that created a divide, between him and his dad and so forth. And my first inclination was to be like, "Bro, what?"
Yeah.
No, that it was their fault.
You're in my house, right?
yeah. But it was, as I sat with it and I thought about it, I really began to sit with my own thoughts and just, okay, why am I at where I'm at? What am I thinking right now? What am I feeling? Why am I feeling that? And being okay with sitting with my thoughts and being honest with myself, I had to go to him and say, "You're right." And I'm grateful for you, sharing that with me, which has probably been the greatest part of just, I think, having other guys that speak honestly, that can help you process that, because and they're doing it because they genuinely care for you. It's not a pointing fingers thing. It's not a "I'm a better than you" thing. It's they genuinely care for you and your relationships. And that's, obviously what you experienced with your mom and Beth, but for us to have that in our life is just absolutely invaluable. Well, and in your situation, of course, it was talking about, well, what would that have been? Which made me think, man, why didn't my buddy say, "Hey, you should maybe take this pill"?
Yeah, right. Well, and not only the pill, but also, I talked to a counselor, and if I could afford it, everybody I love, and some people I don't love would have a counselor, and just to be able to go someplace and talk things through, and for your listeners, I can't stress enough the importance of having people to talk things through with.
Yeah.
It is so important, and you probably won't do the shameless plug for it, but I will, because I've attended your event for RESGEN, and I think that's an incredibly smart and powerful kickoff to men being vulnerable. But it's only a day.
Yeah, it's 5. Yeah, it's 5. It's 5 hours.
Yeah,
and it's a lot of content. It's like drinking through a fire hydrant. But I remember texting because you were able, because normally you've been out of town. You were able to come for the first time, and I was so thankful that you were. And I remember texting afterwards, and you were sick. Yeah, but you still came. Probably wore a mask because you're self-conscious, or you're conscious of other people. But you told me, like, I wasn't feeling super well. You weren't really that sick, but I just remember the words you said, and they were very meaningful to me. But you said, "Tom, it was a beautiful day." Like, those are the words that you used. And I knew what you meant by that. And that was meaningful, because I knew that those words meant something to you, and that the day meant something to you. So anyway.
And then beyond that is just to find a kickoff from that to, a group of guys.
Yep.
2 or 3 one, it doesn't matter. But just that you've got some folks who are going to talk to you like your buddy did on your back deck, or talk to you like, my loved ones did, or my friends who are doctors did. And that's just really important to keep us on the rails that way.
Yeah, it is. And having that consistency, the band of brothers that they journey through life together is so crucial. All right, so we're going to be needing to kind of wrap up here. I mean, we could talk all day long. I know there's so much more we could talk about, but I do want to talk about just the importance of your faith and your personal relationship with Jesus, and how important that has been with you as you've gone through different challenges with your family. We all have things that are challenges, that are struggles that we grow through in family and relationships. And we don't have to go into the specifics, but there's been some challenges that you've experienced. You've shared some of your personal challenges, professionally, and even just, I think that as husbands and dads, I know I've felt this way at many times. It's like, man, I just know I'm not measuring up to be the husband that Laura deserves right now, or the dad that Isaiah and Chase deserve right now. And and you can feel shame, and you can feel like, oh, why did I do that? And or whatever. But thankful for God's grace, their grace as well. But when we go through challenges and we see our kids struggle, or we see our spouses struggle, those are tests of our faith. Those are tests of just our just relationships and those kinds of things. So as you've had different situations and challenges with your family, just where's your faith been so key and crucial in weathering those challenges and going through those?
Well, there's a lot of ways to take that conversation, a lot of roads, but I'll try to keep it on the path with this kind of thesis up front. And that is that I think that for my family and for the mental health challenges that we have, and we all have them in our house, they are mostly rooted in us thinking differently of ourselves than Christ does, and almost weaponizing that, punishing ourselves for it, because we just couldn't be true, right? If God only knew how bad I was, or my heart, then there's no way he would have died for me. And that kind of Midwest, no, I don't deserve it kind of thing. I think when it fully manifests itself, it can be really damaging to your own well-being. And the more you spend time in Scripture, and the more that I learned it through prayer life, that's not where Christ is. That's not what Christ has said to me. There's no evidence of that. His evidence is, no, actually, I love you so much, I'm going to kind of pick you up and pull you through this. You just rest in me, and I'll pull you through this. And never was that more true than, it was just at the beginning of November, we celebrated 4 years of sobriety for my wife. And it took us a long time to get her to the point where she would get treatment for it, and she voluntarily did it. I don't want to make it sound like the struggle to get her treatment was something involuntary. It was just getting to the point where we could confess that we had a problem. And with our marketing company and with the lifestyle that we have, I found myself just, being in Napa Valley a lot, or at a brewery event. And, we were just having fun, Michelin star dinners and wine pairings. And I remember, after shipments upon shipments of wine to our home, because we're have friends in the wine business, my wife and I looked at each other and we're like, we're drinking a lot of wine. Maybe we should just chill out a little bit. And so for Lent one year, we don't really give anything up for Lent, but this one year we did. And we gave up wine. We gave up drinking. And after a couple of weeks, I told her, man, I feel better. I think I've lost 5 pounds already. I'm sleeping better. I'm more energized. And she confessed to me. She's like, I can't do it. Can't give it up. And that turned to some other actions that where we just realized she had a problem and couldn't heal herself. So we went to Hazelden Betty Ford and just outside of the Twin Cities, and it was the most amazing thing for her. And it took a lot of courage for her to raise her hand that she needed that. And I think it took a lot of courage for my girls and I to drive her up there on a Sunday morning. And man, I would just remember checking her in, and she walked down this whole hallway, and we're all looking at her. And we go out to the car, and I remember being in the driver's seat of my car, and my girls are looking at me, and I just started crying uncontrollably. I mean, like, it was fierce. It's a funny story now because my girls thought I was laughing. A couple of them thought I was laughing, and then once they realized that I was hysterical, they felt bad about laughing.
Yeah.
And I don't know why I tell that story, but it's just like this shared intimate moment with my family. Nobody gets that. Nobody gets to touch that. The times that I had with my girls driving up there on the weekends to see her, spending time over my 13-year-old daughter's birthday, which happened to be on one of the Sundays we were visiting. And so she celebrated her teenage birthday with all the ladies on Beth's floor through her party. So everybody was in there for treatment, and they were just so lovely and wonderful and good to her. But God didn't have to give us all that blessing. He didn't have to use those things to carry us through. And looking back, we have all these intimate moments that we have that are part of our folklore that we get. And now, you've been out to events at our place where we host them, and we've, got a big dinner out there, and we do that. We do farm to table dinners to raise money for ministries, and it's super fun. But I look at my girls from across the way, and I catch their eyes, and I know they're going to be okay. And they're saying to me, like, just through their body language, like, we're doing fine. And so, it's a struggle. Being a teenager is harder than it's ever been. Just like being a mom is harder than it's ever been. Being a dad is harder than it's just a harder time, it feels like, than it's ever been. And we'll probably say that in every generation from here to come, because it's not like we're getting...
the world's not getting better.
Yeah, we're not getting more Christ-like as humanity.
Right, yeah.
But that's the way that Christ has spoken to me through all this. Is there's been real gestures, real gifts that I would treasure more than anything I have with my family that were only given to us in that moment of struggle and what would normally look from the outside as being tragedy.
Yeah. Well, and we don't like when we go through difficult challenges and difficult times, but if we're honest, and we look back, we say those are the times when we grow the most, especially if you lean into it. we can fight tooth and nail and all of that, and there's still some growth that still does happen in that space too. But when we lean into it and say, okay, God, we are going to trust you. We don't like this. We do not like this, but we're going to trust you even still. There's a growth that happens supernaturally with the Lord, but then a growth that you just spoke of our relationships with one another as well.
Yeah. It really piles on to the conversations we've been having this whole time, Tom, in that, if you want to know where Christ is, it's right when you say, I can't do this on my own. Right then. Right. And then you layer that onto the kind of the struggles of men. That's the thrust of this whole conversation. And in that car, what I was confessing with my tears is that I don't know how to do this. And God was right there, right? Same thing with the rest I've been given during this time. And so and I'm sure there'll be more tragedies in life where I get to that point. Now, naturally, we resist it, and we certainly don't pursue it. That's sadistic. But I do think that we'd be better off welcoming it more than we do.
Yeah.
Easy to say.
Yeah, easy to say. All right, well, we do need to wrap, but I do have one more question before and then we'll do a final thing that I just call the final word.
Okay.
And it's 60 to 90 seconds of whatever the Lord lays on your heart to just share as a final word of encouragement, challenge, whatever, for listeners. But I have to believe that there's guys out there, people that have been listening, that they're feeling overwhelmed, they're feeling stressed out, they're feeling burdened, and they're not going to be given a sabbatical.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to be afforded the opportunity that you were afforded, and in a position where you can, do that. Which I know that you just feel so blessed, and that was a part of your story, but that's not going to necessarily be a part of everybody's story. And so they're like, okay, so I feel stressed, I feel overwhelmed, I feel burdened, but that's not a possibility for me. What would be your encouragement to those individuals?
So, if you can't find a sabbatical, which I recognize how much of a gift it is, then I would run to the places where we're already commanded to have rest. So for me, that's going to look like a quiet time. I mean, just being quiet with a cup of coffee and a psalm, and just praying that the Lord would speak through that to me on what's next or how to discern. The next would be Sabbath. Can you Sunday? We call it Domingo at our house? I mean, can you Sabbath? Can you just take a day and just say, you know what, my phone's going to go in the lockbox. Mm-hmm. I'm going to resist football. Okay, that's a big one, right? But I'm just going to try to be present with my wife, and present with the Lord, or just present alone with the Lord, and try to, be mindful of what I'm thinking about and what He's asking me to think about. So I think you can run to the places that you already are. I was tempted to take a big trip at the beginning of the sabbatical to, get away, but it's really been on my heart to just be, God wants me to be where I already am. Mm-hmm. Learn how to find peace and rest there. I think that's harder than on a beach. Mm-hmm. But I think for those really struggling to find out what to do next, if they're overwhelmed, if they're burnt out, to find a place where there is built-in capacity and take it. Mm-hmm. Take that part back. Mm-hmm. Just for a time till you can get some discernment. Because really, if I didn't have the time, I don't know if I would have come to the conclusions I did, which is scary because that means that probably something would have happened, in the future that may have prevented me from being there anyway, but maybe not of my own accord. Right?
Yeah. So finding those pockets of rest that do exist, but we just need to be willing to enter those.
Yeah.
And build the margin to
with an agenda, right?
Yeah.
And like we saw, you got to build up walls. You got to protect that time.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Well, Matt, thank you. Thank you for just your openness and honesty. More importantly, your friendship for many, many years. But your willingness just to come on and just to share your story. This was a powerful time of just listening to your story, what God's been teaching you, what you've been learning about yourself, about the Lord, about just our need for rest. And that's an encouragement to me to try to get better at resting myself.
Yeah.
And so that's a good encouragement and challenge for me. So as I mentioned, we do end our time with something we call the final word, 69 seconds, whatever the Lord lays on your heart as a final word for listeners.
Yeah, good. Well, Tom, I'll kind of just thank you for having me on to talk about these things. I'm passionate about it because of what's gone on recently. And I think that just, in closing, it's a battle of whether or not I can be the man, and I think that the conclusion is I don't think we're born to be the man, to put up our own name in lights. I think we're born to be the man that Christ died for. And so there's a leaning back in His arms rather than standing up, pulling up my own bootstraps that we need to do. And then once you're there and you've got that thoughtfulness and mindfulness about where your identity truly comes from, and this is the next chapter for me, is holding that in balance, right hand and left hand, with then, okay, so now I'm resting in the Lord for my identity, but He still created this guy to swing for the fences. So let's go do something. But let's remember that that's not gonna be who I am. Mm-hmm. That's just how I serve.
Yeah. Oh, it's good. Not who I am, but how I serve. That's a great word. Well, Thank you, brother. I love you. I'm
Yeah,
so appreciative
thank
of our
you.
time together, and thanks for the plug. And so all you guys should be coming to the summit, and Matt will be there, and so you can come and say
I'll
hey
be
to
there.
Matt.
That's right.
All right, bro.
Thanks, Tom. See ya.
Thanks again for listening in on my conversation with Matt Jensen. As always, if you found the episode helpful, I encourage you to share it with others that may find it helpful as well. Also, before you sign off, if you're open to it, I would love for you to take 30 seconds to rate and or review the podcast, as that is such an easy way to help us grow our audience and our impact. If you'd like to connect more with Matt, you can find him on LinkedIn and at mattjensenmarketing.com. Lastly, don't forget to hit up resgen.org to reserve your spots to join us on February 4th for the RESGEN Men's Summit 2023 and on the 2nd or 3rd for our couples event, Date Night Comedy. All right, thanks again for joining me today, everybody. We'll see you next time for another episode of the RESGEN Giving Life Podcast. Until then, continue being men whose life in Christ gives life to others.